Everybody, good morning, everybody. This is Rodney Fong, President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. We're about to go live in a couple of minutes, just give us a few more minutes to let people sign on, and we'll start with Ask the Chamber. Good morning, everybody. This is Rodney Fong, President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and I welcome you and thank you for joining us today in our live webinar series. This one is Ask the Chamber, maybe Stump the Chamber. We want to thank you for joining and love this opportunity where we can come to you and allow you to ask some questions about what's going on in this COVID-19 world, what's the future maybe look like, what the transitions maybe are going to be, what's happening at City Hall, what we're doing and hearing on the state level, and what we're doing for small business here in San Francisco. So want to thank you for participating. Make sure you dial in for other events that we have lined up. Is almost something every week online here at the Chamber. And of course, if you have any questions about the Chamber of Commerce, feel free to just dial us directly and we can try to help you. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jay Cheng, our Director of Public Policy. Take it away, Jay.
Thank you, Rodney. Hi, everybody in webinar land. Welcome to Coronavirus Day 1,000,002. We all know that we've been stuck at home for a long time. Today, like every day, the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce is here for you. Today, on today's webinar, we want to talk about a couple of things. We want to talk about the extended shelter-in-place order to May 31st, what that means for your business, when this might ever end, and what we're going to do as a business community when it finally does end. I'm very, very happy to be joined today by our entire public policy team. We have Ms. Emily Abraham, our public policy manager, and Ms. Amelia Linde, our small business lead. And so with that, we're going to just jump right into it. Many of you have probably heard that Mayor London Breed has extended the shelter-in-place order to May 31st. There are a lot of reasons why the shelter-in-place order was extended, but we've identified really three things we want to look at. The first one was that there's still no treatment available for coronavirus or COVID-19. And when we mean treatment, we don't just mean a vaccine, but really antivirals or things to address and mitigate symptoms to help people survive COVID-19 and help keep hospital capacity at a level minimum. And so since those treatments have not been released, that's one of the reasons why the shelter-in-place order has been extended. The second thing we would look towards is hospital capacity. In San Francisco, we're actually very lucky to have a lot of hospital capacity for a relatively large, small geographic territory. UCSF, Sutter Health, CPMC, General Hospital. We have a lot of hospitals for really only 49 square miles. So our hospital capacity is much larger than other cities or other areas of comparable size. At the same time, there are still concerns around hospital capacity during COVID-19, especially if there's not an available treatment, and the number of beds that would be taken up if there was an outbreak. And so that's one of the reasons why the shelter-in-place has been extended until we can guarantee that hospital capacity would be sufficient to deal with any outbreaks that would come up. The final reason is susceptibility. Large swaths of our population are still susceptible. It's a Friday, everybody. They're still vulnerable to the virus. And they're vulnerable to the virus for a lot of reasons. Either they don't have the antibodies for the virus. We obviously don't have a lot of people who are immune to the virus. And we don't have a vaccine for the virus. We've seen the city really expand its city test SF and our testing possibility over the last week and a half. And I think that expansion of testing is really a chance to try and get a handle on how many people are immune or have antibodies to the virus that will allow us to say, okay, large parts of the population have herd immunity and we're able to open that back up. But until then, we have had extended our shelter in place. However, in this new shelter-in-place order, you may have noticed that a lot of businesses, some businesses, have been allowed to slowly reopen. And there's been a gradual reopening in the economy through the shelter-in-place order. And we expect that trend to continue. We want to talk about some of the essential businesses that have been reopened. First, if you are labeled an outdoor business, which is to say that the majority of your business or all of your business is handled outdoors, you've been allowed to reopen during COVID-19. You still have to follow social distancing protocols. You still have to have 6 feet of space between your customers, but you have been allowed to move forward. Frankly, the folks that this most applies to are plant nurseries or outdoor garden centers. So if you are a slope garden center, congratulations, you are going to be allowed to reopen. However, if you're a bar or a cafe or that wonderful beer garden that I miss in Hayes Valley, you do not count as an outdoor business. Yes, your business is transacted outdoors, you have public benches, et cetera, but you are not considered an outdoor business by the health order. We're really talking about outdoor retail that applies to this. The second industry that's really been allowed to reopen is construction. You might remember that in the last extension of the shelter in place, almost all construction was really shut down by the order. And we've seen that as a dramatic impact. A lot of the economy in San Francisco is driven by construction, commercial and residential. Construction in this new shelter-in-place order has essentially been reopened with very significant safety regulations and safety guidelines. This makes sense because the construction industry is, frankly, an industry that's used to high levels of regulation and used to high levels of health and safety standards. And so they've indicated as an industry that they are able to cope with very strict restrictions. They're able to train their workers very quickly on new and different restrictions, and they're willing to stay within those restrictive areas. And so we've seen that construction has been allowed to reopen. That's been a significant movement in our economy. The third real opening that we've seen in the economy is around real estate. Previously, moving services were pretty much shut down in the extended shelter-in-place order. This was obviously difficult. When folks need to move, they need to move. Moving services have been reopened, especially for residential services. And so we've seen, we'll see movement activity begin to reopen. With moving services reopening, real estate transactions are also going to start moving again. And we've seen a relaxation around what you're allowed to do around real estate transactions. Previously, you were really only allowed to do in-person showings if the unit was vacant, if it was not occupied or no one was currently living there. Now you are allowed to do in-person showings in occupied units as long as the person living there is not actually present in the unit. And so we'll see a little bit of real estate pick back up. That's also a significant part of the San Francisco economy. And so we'll see some progress in that direction. With that, I want to pass it off to Emily to talk about when we can expect a shelter-in-place order to end, and what are the determining factors that our governments are looking at in order to make that shelter-in-place order happen, or in order to make that ending happen. Emily, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're staying well. Let's see. So any reopening would be based on what the state of California is calling their 6 pillars. These were announced by Governor Newsom just a week or two ago. So I'll go through them briefly. There are 6 of them, the first one being monitoring. So this is the ability to monitor and protect our communities through testing, contact tracing, isolating, and supporting those who have already been exposed. The state views this goal met once they are prepared to test everyone who is symptomatic, and we have the ability to identify contacts of those who were tested positive. The second pillar is preventing infection. So this is the ability to prevent infection in people who are high risk for COVID-19. This means ensuring that older Californians and vulnerable populations are living in their own homes and are supported in ways that they can continue social distancing. This also means that we have to have a plan to quickly identify and contain outbreaks in facilities housing older Californians, those living with disabilities, and those currently incarcerated. The third pillar is increasing surge capacity and readiness. So while our hospitals have gotten a lot more PPE, we have to be prepared for a mass outbreak and the ability to handle other critical healthcare needs at the same time. The fourth pillar is developing therapeutics. The state is currently working with private, public, academic institutions to develop these medicines. But we have to have, like Jay said, we have to have a vaccine. So the state's working towards that. The fifth pillar is ensuring facilities can support physical distancing. So as you all can imagine, a big step back to normalcy would be opening up businesses again, schools, child care centers, and that means working with businesses to modify physical environments to support physical distancing. This might include, restaurants having less tables, school schedules being staggered, reduction in large gatherings. So the final sixth pillar is the ability to determine when to reinstitute certain measures. So this will be based on data, the ability to quickly communicate new measures, and making sure that the previous pillars are met. The governor did say that we can expect a reduction in large gatherings, including sporting events, concerts, celebrations, until there is a vaccine. So normalcy will be a bit different until there is that vaccine.
Great. So do you want me to talk a little bit about when we start to get towards reopening, thinking about some of the new stipulations we'll have to look at and where those should come from?
Yes, there was a technical glitch on my part, so I made the transition on that. But thanks.
That's okay. I got it. Perfect. Well, so, once we reach certain stipulations for reopening, we'll start to see, as we are already with some of these relaxed restrictions on May 4th in San Francisco, certain businesses being able to reopen. But with that, one thing we've been thinking about the chamber is that we are hearing kind of sort of vague terms, like with increased safety measures around COVID-19 to prevent the spread of the virus. And so what we thought about is that businesses really should be able to be prepared for what those increased safety measures are. So one thing we're looking at doing is hearing from the business community about certain safety precautions businesses are already taking, as well as ideas for things that we can be doing as a business community, not only to keep our employees safe, but also to make sure that our consumer, once things do reopen, feels safe and confident coming back into our environments. So we will be putting out a survey to seek feedback and input about what you and your industry are doing already and what you think is feasible. Also to raise any concerns about things you've heard about that might not seem feasible for your industry. And the thing to remember that's important is every industry is completely different in terms of what we have to do to keep people safe. A massive store with, huge square footage can more easily spread people out than perhaps a small restaurant. And one thing we've talked about is with separating tables and doing this kind of activity to ensure social distancing, that obviously is going to hurt the bottom line. So one thing we want to hear about is ideas that businesses, might like to see supported for helping increase capacity while ensuring a safe environment, whether that's trying to improve, access to open spaces outside a building, ease of permitting or allowances for those kind of areas, as well as just creating a, clear guide for everyone to follow so that there's no question or concern about what will or will not be enforced and how folks can be preparing now as we start thinking about reopening. So I would just mention OSHA has some excellent guides out that are really just, they're very clear, but they are clearly preliminary. They're just really focused around the same basic areas of social distancing and hygiene and disinfecting. They also do get specific into several different industries. The FDA also has released some interim guidance on businesses that are operating amid COVID-19. So we think that we need to just kind of take that up a step. And we think that some of that should certainly come from health professionals who are, helping us understand the best practices. But we also think that it's really important that the business community's voice in what is feasible, what's not feasible, and maybe some new ideas is heard as well. So if you're interested in that, look out for our survey we're going to be doing in that area because we think it's an important discussion. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Amelia. And I'm back online. We've had some questions come through. Some of them are, well, I'll say more urgent than others. I think one of the most urgent questions we had come through was does the definition of outdoor businesses include the idea of outdoor summer camps for our children? For all of you who have children at home or are sheltering in place with your children, I know how critical this question is to get them out of the house. I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is no. The definition of outdoor businesses does not include things like outdoor childcare or outdoor summer camps. I really apologize. The good news is that the current shelter-in-place orders is expected to end on May 31st. And so our hope is that by May 31st, there will be an update there that will allow childcare to move forward. We've seen and heard from the mayor's office that they understand that childcare is one of the most important things to reopen. Rodney has talked about the idea that our economy can't really fully reopen until our schools reopen and are allowed to take children take children there and have parents feel comfortable there. I want to pass it off to Rodney a little bit to talk very briefly about that, because I think it's an important point that a lot of us miss when thinking about economic recovery.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, I think it's something that we overlook, especially when we're talking about economic recovery or commerce. But the fact is that when schools get fully back open, both parents can get back to work, or a parent can get back to work. It's so important. 38% of our workforce are parents. I don't know the number that are caring for seniors, for parents, for the elderly. And so that number also grows. And so making sure that our senior care facilities, our schools are back in line is so important. I think we're going to probably also see a shift in the pattern of where and how people work. This has probably taught us, this exercise in being Zoom together, taught us that it's actually fairly efficient for some things. I still miss hugging and shaking hands and seeing all of you. And I'm looking forward to that when that comes back. But for certain things, this is a good way to communicate and good effective way to get work done. So don't be surprised if you start to see people work from home 2-3 days a week and then come into the office for group meetings, for dynamic conversations. If that is the case, then internet access and broadband bandwidth is so important to get out to the entire Bay Area, to the entire Northern California. As San Francisco wants to maintain its headquarter companies in San Francisco, for them to be successful, that means that internet service in Modesto, Milpitas, and Gilroy also need to be very effective for those people to be able to work remotely. So those are some of the things that are coming to the mind of the chamber that are important to, and were not so obvious before, but so important to our recovery efforts.
We got a question on whether San Francisco will be more conservative about its reopening in comparison to the state, or do we believe that the city will follow state guidelines? We will say that certainly Mayor London Breed was more proactive around shelter in place than the state, or maybe the country was in general. She probably beat the country from shelter in place by 6 or 7 days. I think at this point that the state and the city are communicating very closely around guidelines around shelter in place. The Bay Area obviously is a region, and there's a lot of traffic, frankly, that comes in and out of the Bay Area from the rest of the state of California. And so the two are uniquely tied. We think at this point that the state and the city are going to move very closely around its shelter in place guidelines and how it's going to move forward with shelter in place. We've seen the state and Governor Gavin Newsom talk about the importance of local control around this issue, that different areas will move at different speeds. We've certainly seen Los Angeles County move at a different speed than the Bay Area. Sometimes faster, they were faster to us on construction, sometimes slower. They were the first ones to extend their shelter in place out to mid-May. And so we'll definitely, there's a little bit of dissonance that we're going to see throughout the state, but in general, I think counties have started locking in the state around coordination. We had another question around financial resources for small businesses. What financial resources there are available for small businesses, and what's the chamber position around the best strategy? I want to pass it off to Amelia really quickly to talk about the financial resources that are currently available for small businesses, and then back to Rodney to talk about the Economic Recovery Task Force and the strategy the chamber is taking to financial resources for small businesses. Amelia?
Great, thank you. So obviously we've seen a pretty wide variety of financial resources become available, everything including loans, subsidized loans, and grants from the federal government, local government, even city government, and private sector. Unfortunately, with those resources that rolled out pretty quickly, the demand also rolled out very quickly. So a lot of those initial programs have run through their initial funding. The original iteration of the federal government's answer, which was the CARES Act, and that gave us the PPP program and additional support for the EIDL loan program. As we know, that program ran out of funding, but then it had new funding appropriated to it. So those loans from that second round are still, loans and grants, are still being processed. And just we want to remind folks that if you did apply the first time around and didn't get through, to keep your application in line with whatever institution you applied with, because a lot of folks are not now able to even accept new applications because they had such a backlog the first time around, but they are working to move through those, as we've seen from some of the larger financial institutions. That being said, if you did not get through with maybe your primary financial lender, or you didn't have a relationship with a organization that was processing those programs previously, the SBA was able to onboard several new lenders, including organizations like PayPal and Square, who were able to form new relationships with potential small businesses and help with some of that processing. As far as I know, they still have some openings on that front, so that would be another place for folks to look. At the local level, the city did a tremendous job. We have to remember the scale of this impact on small businesses. So they actually did a tremendous job stepping forward and providing local resources, more than I've seen in a lot of other major cities. But again, there was a finite limit to that. There are still some micro grants available within specific neighborhoods and for women-owned businesses that can be explored further at OEWD's website. And then beyond that, just do continue checking. A lot of those major tech companies that are based in San Francisco have taken a concerted effort and interest in supporting local small businesses in the Bay Area and other cities where they operate. So do check out their websites and social media. I believe Facebook has a grant program which is not first comes, first serve, but rather need-based, which closes later this week. So there's certainly a variety of things, and I think it's not the end of it. But I know the question was also talking about as we come through recovery, and the Chamber does believe that, you know, this is not a one-time inflection point event. This is something that will continue developing, and it takes a lot of capital for businesses to get back on their feet. When your storerooms have been empty, you have to restock, you have to rehire, perhaps new signage if you're having to pivot your business model. So we do believe that there needs to continue to be financial support for rehiring, refiring up our economy, and getting businesses going again. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. I'll just pick up on that. The notion of capital to re-enter and to reopen. Restaurants have been closed, stoves, ovens have been shut down for a number of weeks here, and it's going to take capital to do that. Kind of tying in the points about when we reopen and when we went into shelter in place. We have a little bit of advantage, I think, watching globally what's happening and how countries and states are potentially trying to reopen. And I think watching their successes, watching maybe some of their failures gives us a little bit of a head start to try to implement some of those things. People have talked about the recovery curve, and it could be L-shaped, it could be V-shaped. One thing I think we want to protect ourselves and make ourselves aware, it could be a W shape, where we do open back up. That little bit of capital that some people have to open back up is spent. And then possibly just in our own exuberance, hey, we're back open for business, but the consumer confidence isn't there yet. Maybe the schools aren't back online. And what we talked about earlier, both parents can't make it back downtown to buy those sandwiches downtown. And so there's some disappointment even after opening. And then maybe we need to get another second wave in the fall. So I think to some degree, we want to be conservative about it. We want to pick our window to go. We want to be prepared. And to some degree, we have like a one good shot at this. We don't necessarily have the ammunition or the capital to be able to do it twice. So we want to pick our window. I know everybody's anxious. I'm anxious to get back open, but I think we've got to pick our window to be smart about that. About 10 days ago, the mayor had asked me if I was interested in co-chairing the San Francisco Economic Recovery Task Force. I am one of 4 co-chairs. We'll sit next to Carmen Chu, Jose Cisneros, Rudy Gonzalez representing labor. The 4 of us, along with some city staff, will be organizing an 80-person task force. We don't know the answers to everything. We are going to pull information, suggestions, ideas, solutions from everybody beyond that 80-person task force. So if I can just give you a little bit of framework, there'll be several different meetings with those task force members. There'll be also opportunity for all of you and sector leaders to come in and provide information, give suggestions. There's a website that you can go to right now or for the public. It's onesanfrancisco.org/COVID-19 recovery. And there's a great survey that you can enter there to talk about immediate solutions, midterm solutions, and long-term solutions or ideas. In many ways, this is a restart button for San Francisco. And why not? Why shouldn't we talk about what the long-range plans are, what the long-range infrastructure investments might be that become job creators, that become job generators? So fill out that information, and you'll be able to track all of the task force work online. They're recording all of the webinars, their open sessions. And from my perspective, even if you don't sit on the task force, your opinions are very much welcomed and wanted at this time. San Francisco maybe has a great opportunity with so many entrepreneurs in our area, so much access to technology, so many great academia institutions close by us. So if anybody can figure out how to do this right and get out of it, we have to stand a great chance with all this creativity, all this energy, and inquisitiveness that it's made our success here as a region so successful. So I'll leave it at that. And if you want, you can email me and ask any other questions related to the task force if you have them.
Great, thanks, Rodney. We had a question about rent for commercial buildings and residential buildings. And the question is, if the tenant does not pay their April or May rent, when exactly are they obligated to repay that rent? That is a very complicated question. It's a very complicated question. We'll do our best to try and answer it here, but really we have to recommend that you check in with your legal counsel or have a discussion with your landlord and tenant around that specific issue. It really changes based on your issue. Broadly, we'd say if you are a residential tenant if it's a residential unit and the tenant has not been able to pay its rent due to COVID-19, the mayor has a current eviction moratorium that says that tenants who are unable to pay during April and May should get some leeway from its landlord. The landlord will not be able to evict them due to non-payment of rent. That eviction moratorium says that the tenant should repay within 6 months after COVID-19, the shelter in place is ended. And so that kind of establishes the 6-month window after shelter in place is over to kind of fulfill that rent. The court system has said that it is shut down during the state of emergency, the COVID-19 state of emergency, and is not processing any evictions, unlawful detainers, et cetera, essentially giving rent relief to those tenants. The court system has said that it may stay shut down as much as 90 days after the shelter in place or the state of emergency is over. And that's a moving deadline. And so really that changes things a lot for landlords and tenants because there's no mechanism to process those disputes. And so for that, that's partially why that conversation is so complicated. We have a lot of different deadlines that are being in place around the court system, around the states and the locals. We really encourage you to check in with your legal counsel around that issue. We got a great question about the tech divide and how the city will support the tech divide for our city families. I think when we talk about the tech divide, there are two things we really talk about. One is that how do we address the digital divide around our neighborhoods, how some neighborhoods really do have quite a great bit of bandwidth and access, and other neighborhoods do not have that same level of digital access and bandwidth. And of course, there's a tech divide that we talk about. There are a lot of folks who are able to work from home. Their businesses and their jobs support remote work. And there are a lot of workers who are not able to work from home. Their businesses are really based around brick and mortar and service locations. And so that is the second tech divide. I'm going to talk about the first, and then I'm going to talk about the first aspect of this, and then I'm going to pass off to Emily Abraham to talk about the second aspect, especially around what the city's done around Health ESF and giving some money back to workers from our Health ESF pot to support our hourly workers and our service and retail workers. The first half of this is that the Chamber of Commerce's perspective is that what the city really must do right now is prioritize its communications infrastructure and build out its fiber and bandwidth in all of our neighborhoods in order to provide the same level of digital access, really quality, high speed, reliable digital access throughout the city and throughout their neighborhoods. It's really unacceptable if in a work from home environment, it's really unacceptable that some folks don't have stable bandwidth in order to effectively work from home. And that's going to have long-term impacts on their family's income, on their ability to obtain future work from home jobs. And so that's something we're very focused on. We work very closely with our telecommunication partners, AT&T, Comcast, Crown Castle, around making sure that their communication sites are moving forward, that they're able to deliver the bandwidth that they want to deliver, and that those projects are moving quickly as fast as possible. We know that work from home is really stretching our city's bandwidth to the limit, and this is going to be a real issue for us long term. On the second aspect of that question, we've really pushed for as much support as possible for hourly workers, food service workers, retail workers. We know those are the people who are most dramatically impacted by the pandemic. Those are the first jobs that were cut, the first layoffs that have happened. And so throughout our advocacy around the PPP loan or SBA loans or whatever, it's really been about, these loans are forgivable if you can provide those jobs to those hourly workers, right? Even if there's not that much for them to do, you need to hire them so that they can get paid, and it becomes a de facto stimulus check. We've done another local approach around Health ESF, the Healthcare Security Ordinance, which was passed in 2008, and now due to Obamacare isn't really used for anything. It's really used for very limited medical use. I'm going to pass it off to Emily to talk about what we've been able to do there to provide direct stimulus financial assistance to our hourly workers.
Thanks, Jay. So as Jay mentioned, the Health ESF Fund, this is primarily used for those brick and mortar retail restaurant employers. There are about 104,000 San Francisco employees who have a medical reimbursement account with the city. And as Jay mentioned, it comes to about $1,200 in it that current employees have for limited medical expenses. And with the mayor's new change to the rules and MRAs, individuals can take that money and use it for almost anything. So essentially, with freeing up some of the Health ESF funds, where it'll allow those employees from brick and mortar restaurants who can't work from home, or retail workers who can't really, they're, quote unquote, thought workers who can work from home, that they can have some of that extra cash to help with their, rent, any fees they might have, groceries, and then also maybe helping with that tech divide if they need to access any new equipment.
Great, thanks, Emily. We had a couple questions come through, and then we're going to wrap it up. We really appreciate your time today. We have 3 last questions that we're going to try and address as quickly as possible. We know people get zoomed out quickly during this time. We've all been on endless Zooms, and so we're going to try and make sure this doesn't become one of them. We had a question about, that many people are concerned that the relief programs will run out before we can get back in business, right? The PPP loan was really designed for an 8-week period. It was supposed to give you 2 months worth of payroll, and the Bay Area is now in 11 weeks of shelter in place. That's absolutely a legitimate concern. And frankly, that's one of the things that we are most worried about from the Chamber of Commerce perspective. Rodney talked about the W curve for economic recovery. Our greatest fear is that we do a downturn, we try and come back up, we come back up too early, we release shelter in place too early, and it shoots, another outbreak happens, it shoots back down the economy, and we have to come back up again. As Rodney said, a lot of small businesses are simply not going to survive that second downturn. They don't have enough capital to succeed. So it's really important that when we reopen the economy, we do it the right way. That being said, a lot of there's no relief program that will ever be sufficient enough for the kind of economic damage that happened from the pandemic. And so really the most relief that we can provide for our small businesses is giving them a pathway forward to reopen during the pandemic. And so a lot of our work has gone into that direction. We've advocated for things like a Healthy Places certification, a voluntary certification that small businesses can get from the state or local government that says that they're following social distancing protocols, that they have reformatted their floor plans, and that they're open for business in a safe and healthy way. And our initial reports from China have shown that companies who have done that, businesses that have done that, get better success and more traction with consumers. And it's a safe and easy way to help businesses slowly reopen. we've pushed from public health officials for clear guidelines about what businesses need to think about and follow in order to reopen, and how to be safe when doing so. We want to be backed by science. And so we've pushed public health officials to tell us, how can our businesses reopen in a safe and healthy way? Can small retailers follow the guidance of grocery stores and have appropriate social distancing? And will that allow them to reopen sooner? And so we've investigated a lot of those questions. A lot of those questions are why construction industry was allowed to reopen earlier, because we were able to prove out that this was a safe industry to reopen. We're looking at things like barbershops and nail salons. They are actually heavily regulated by the State Board of Cosmetology. And so they're also used to real state regulations. And so we're using that construction as an example to pursue other smaller businesses that might be interested in reopening. We had a question about the impact of COVID-19 on the city's budget. The impact is devastating. The city budget is $13 billion. The decline due to COVID-19 is estimated to be $1 to $1.7 billion on the city's budget. There is simply only one thing to do when you face a budget deficit that large, and that is to cut. And so we're going to see significant service cuts from the city moving forward. Our message to the city or from the business community is the stronger that the business community can be, the stronger that recovery can be, the faster that budget will grow. And so we've really pushed for, again, smart, safe reopening of business in order to help that city budget grow as quickly as possible. With that, I think we are at time. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. We are chock full of upcoming events, including our most exciting one is this upcoming Monday, 3 p.m., a conversation with Dr. George Rutherford. He is the head epidemiologist. See, I don't even know how to say that word. He's the top COVID-19 virus expert from UCSF, which is, one of the top hospitals in the nation. We've heard he gives excellent dating advice about how to date during COVID-19 and when it's safe to date, which for many of us is our top priority or top concern. Not me, because I'm happily married, but I'm empathetic to many of the people who may be on the call. So we encourage you to please join us for all of next week's events. They're going to be a real great series of conversations. We hope you stay safe. We hope you stay healthy. And we hope you stay with the Chamber. Our last pitch is that the Chamber is just like NPR. We are a member-supported, member-driven organization. We simply do not exist without you. And so please become a member of the Chamber if you're not a member of the Chamber. If you are a member of the Chamber, thank you so much for your support, financial support, and moral support. We really appreciate it. Learn more at sfchamber.com and have a great day.